Hello everyone, good morning once again and welcome to Drishti IAS. Myself Girish Venkatesh and we are live online on Drishti Learning app. And this is the session for UGC-NET Paper 2 Political Science. And yesterday we had come up with the traditional approach and we did the revision with regard to the traditional approach, and the main thing was we did the historical, we did the philosophical, legal, and then we talked about the new institutional approach and the models with regard to the new institutional approach. Before we start the class, once again, I'll tell everyone to get your copies and pen in front of you, one bottle of water in front of you, so that for the next 2 hours, you are exclusively with me and I am exclusively for you. So the next 2 hours, we are going to discuss everything with regard to the contemporary politics approach. Yes, we talked about the traditional approach. Let's go with a recap, because you always know that I start with a recap of the last class. So let's go with a recap. And the recap was like, we started with the traditional approach. Couple of classes back, we started with the traditional approach, and this traditional approach was till the outbreak of the Second World War. And this traditional approach basically emphasized on the study of state and governance. That means it was primarily concerned with the study of states' organization as well as operations, as well as states' concept and ideas. And the methods used were normative and philosophical. And the last thing, and here in traditional approach, we talked about 4 approaches. One was the philosophical approach, historical approach, legal approach, and institutional approach. These are the 4 types of traditional approaches where we talked about. In philosophical approach, I should tell you in one line, the entire philosophical approach depends upon, it's basically upon the fundamental political ideas, values, and concepts. That means the political systems, they are compared accordingly to the fundamental political ideas, values, and concepts. And the proponents of this approach were Plato, Immanuel Kant, and Aristotle. So if you go into the characteristics of this particular approach, then it's normative analysis. Normative analysis means there is a normative framework for evaluating different political systems, that too on the basis of justice, ethics, and moral principles. And after that, it talks about political theories. That is, they say that here the proponents of philosophical approach, they are of the belief that whatever comparative politics is there, it's often drawn from political theories like that of liberalism, conservatism, socialism, feminism, and these are the political theories according to which political systems are compared. Okay, then one more characteristics was there, that it's based on values and ideas. Based on values and ideals, that is, there is a study of values and ideals, and these values and ideals are basically the values and ideals of freedom, it's of equality, and it's of democracy. So the countries or the political systems, they are compared on the basis of these values. So this was what was philosophical approach. That means it was based on fundamental values and ideas. That's it. And its characteristic was historical context, then political theory, as well as values and ideals. What about the historical? It was normative. Okay. What about the historical approach? The historical approach, it laid emphasis or it laid significance on historical events and developments that helped in shaping contemporary political system. And this particular approach, it was the proponents of this approach were Machiavelli, Dunning, and Sabine. And what about the characteristics? It was historical context, that means based on historical events, revolutions, colonialism, and all. Then it was based on a concept called as path dependency. And path dependency means what? Whatever are the past decisions and events, they have an enduring effect. They have an enduring effect on the nation's political trajectory. Then they depend upon the case studies. That means there are case studies, that too in-depth case studies being done. Okay, so this was historical. And when we talked about the legal approach, here we examined different political system on the basis of legal system, constitutional structure, and the rule of law. And the proponents were Serio, Bodin, Hobbes, John Austin, Dicey, and Henry Maine. And what about the characteristics of this approach? It was constitutional analysis. Apart from constitutional analysis, it's based on legal traditions. That means every country has their own legal traditions with regard to common laws, with regard to religious laws, with regard to marriage laws and all. So in that sense also, the comparative study was being done. And the last one was legal institution with regard to courts. And these courts were a source. These courts were an institution which helped in enforcing and interpreting the law. So in this way, in traditional approach, things were compared. Yes, we had talked about the institutional approach also, but so who are there live online? Yes, there was a doubt with regard to, there was a query from Prapti Sharma in the last class, and we had missed the query. So the query is that she wanted to ask me that do we need to refer the study material or other books as well? See, you are going into a competition, and that too UGC-NET GRF. It's not an cakewalk, easy cakewalk nahi hai. So apart from the study materials which are being provided, you have to go with the books also. You have to refer the books. That's why each and every time I say, you refer the books which you have studied, which you have gone through in your BAs and MAs. Okay, you refer those books because you are already aware of those books. And because you have read those books one time, so please go with the books which you have already done with. And after you do this, I'll tell you one thing. Go with the IGNO notes, IGNO materials. IGNO के जो materials होते हैं political science का, उसको आप कहीं से भी लीजिए and go with that. It's a very fantastic material. मतलब IGNO के पूरे materials बहुत ही अच्छे. मतलब I myself I follow it. ठीक है. So I'll tell that IGNO के materials, and Drishti will also be giving you, Drishti IAS will also be providing you the study materials, and the study material or whatever they will be providing you, the booklet and all, the study material which they will be providing you, it's all fantastic, made by matlab, it's all exam pattern and lot of informations are there. Only thing is that you have to be serious and you have to do it, and you have to do each and every preparation. And thank you Prapti for just having this question. And Shubham says, sir, you are teaching very well. Okay, thank you very much, Shubham. Thank you very much. Okay, now these type of comments, these type of feedbacks really encourage us, and it gives us more energy when we are teaching. Okay, so then next class, in the previous class, we talked about new institutional approach, and I said you this new institutional approach It came because of the limitations of the traditional approach. And in this new institutional approach, it came in 1980s and 90s. That means it was there in 1980s and 90s, and it gave a fresh perspective with regard to understanding political institutions. And what about this new institutionalism approach? This new institutionalism approach, it is trying to integrate principles from various disciplines. That means it's trying to integrate knowledge and principles from various disciplines, that is economics, sociology, as well as political science, and it is trying to provide a more comprehensive understanding of political institutions. That means this new institutionalism approach, it's trying to provide a more comprehensive understanding. More comprehensive means a more broad, a more widened, a more in-depth, understanding of political institutions and what will be their impact on political behavior and outcomes. Plus, this new institutionalism, it is also emphasizing the importance of these political institutions in individuals' behavior, in social interactions, as well as in political processes. Apart from this, we also say that the institutions or the political institutions, they are not merely a reflection of individual preferences, rather they have their own independent effects and outcomes. So, and in this approach, the role of formal as well as informal norms, rules, as well as organizational structure, that means this approach highlights the role of formal and informal rule, norms, as well as organizational structures that help in shaping political behavior. Plus, in this new institutional approach, it also brought an attention to the historical as well as the cultural aspects or cultural context in the political institutions. And last but not the least, but the methods which here are case studies, comparative analysis, as well as quantitative techniques. And this new institutional approach, it also opened a new avenue with regard to what? With regard to dialogue and integration with other approaches. Dialogue and integration with other approaches. And what were these other approaches? Behavioralism, rational choice theory, structuralism, Marxism, post-structuralism. And when there was a dialogue and integration with other approaches, it promoted interdisciplinary research and collaboration. Plus, this approach contributed in the understanding of power, in the understanding of conflict, and in the understanding of dynamics in institutional change. So this was new institutionalism, which is basically trying to provide a more comprehensive understanding of what? Political system. And in this new institutional approach, we talked about three models. One was the historical model. The historical model had its own criticism. Then the second one was rational choice institutionalism, and the third one was this also had its own criticism, and the third one was sociological institutionalism. So when we talk about historical institutionalism, here there is more emphasis to history, historical events and all. When we talk about rational choice, it's all based on what? It's all based on the rationality. It's all based on the simplistic assumption of rationality. So these all are the things which we studied. Now today, anyone who is joining me on live, please just send a thumbs up on the live chat so that okay. So today we will be starting with a new topic, that is old and new historical institutionalism. Old and new historical institutionalism. Let's talk about old historical institutionalism. Now, old historical institutionalism, it emphasized on long-term historical analysis. That means it was trying to focus on the study of historical developments and evolutions over that long time. That means whatever historical developments and evolutions of institutions were taking place, it was trying to trace the historical development and evolution of institutions over a long time. So this particular old historical institutionalism, the very first point is trying to tell you that whatever historical analysis this method did was nothing else but it was trying to trace historical developments and historical evolutions of institutions over a longer period of time. Then it depended on path dependency. I said you, path dependency was a concept with regard to historical institutionalism. And what was that path dependency? Path dependency was that in which the past was studied, the past historical events, the past historical revolutions and all, they were studied. So here in this old historical institutionalism, the emphasis is on the notion of path dependency, suggesting that historical events and choices shape the trajectory of institutions, making them resistant to change. That means this particular old historical institutionalism, it is emphasizing on what? It is emphasizing on the notion of path dependency. That means it is giving importance to the concept of path dependency. And according to this concept of path dependency, it suggests that historical events and choices, whatever are the past historical events and whatever are the historical choices, they help in shaping the trajectory of political institutions, making them resistant to change. Okay, and they are resistant to change also. So basically the shaping of the trajectory of institutions, they are all dependent on past historical events and choices. Then there is continuity and stability. That means old historical institutionalism highlights the persistence and stability of institution. That means this old historical event institutionalism, it says that the political institutions are stable as well as they are continuous. That means they will always be there and it's stable, often treating them as relatively fixed and resistant to rapid transformation. That means here in the old historical institutionalism, one thing is very clear, that the proponent of this approach or proponent of this model, they are of the belief that the political institutions, they are fixed, and the political institutions, they are adaptable, or the political institutions, they are resistant to rapid transformation. That means whatever rapid transformation is taking place, they are resistant to it and they are fixed. So that's why they are talking about continuity as well as stability. So when we talk about old historical institutionalism, the first thing which comes to our mind is nothing else but it lays emphasis on historical events. Yeah, it lays emphasis on historical analysis over a longer period of time. That means whatever historical developments and whatever historical evolutions of political institutions have been traced, it has been traced over a long period of time. That means the tracing of historical development and the tracing of historical evolution of institutions is over a long period of time. So the first feature of this old historical institutionalism is with regard to long-term historical analysis. Then the second feature is with regard to what? With regard to path dependency. That means this old historical institutionalism, it completely depends upon the concept of path dependency. And this path dependency concept says that, it suggests that whatever is the shaping of the trajectory of political institutions, whatever is the shaping of the trajectory of political institutions, it depends upon past choices as well as past events. That means the past historical events and choices, they shape the trajectory of political institutions, and they make them resistant to change. And the last feature of this old historical institutionalism is with regard to continuity and stability. It says that this old historical institutionalism, it highlights that the political institutions, they are fixed, that is, they are stable, and they are persistent in the sense their trajectory, it continues. That means there is a continuity and stability of these institutions, and they are often treated them as relatively fixed and resistant to rapid transformation. Then comes next point, it's limited attention to individual agency. Limited attention to individual agency. That means this old historical institutionalism, it gives less emphasis to individual agency and more on the broader structure and historical forces that shape institutional outcomes. That means the old historical institutionalism is not giving importance. It's not giving importance to individual agencies. That means individual actors. It's not giving importance to individual agencies or actors. Rather, it's giving importance to structural and historical forces, that to broader and wider structural and historical forces that are shaping institutional outcomes. And then it is less concerned with policy analysis. That means old historical institutionalism is only concerned with understanding the origin, the evolution, and the endurance of institutions. That means it's not concerned with policy analysis. What is the policy analysis with regard to institutions? It's concerned with the evolution of the institutions. It's concerned with the origin of the institutions. It's concerned with the endurance of these institutions. So when we talk about the features of old historical institutionalism, the first point which comes in our mind is with regard to emphasis on long-term historical analysis. Number one, see, you should know what is the difference between old historical analysis, old historical institutionalism, and new historical institutionalism. See, to be honest, what we are doing is that we are going in a sequence, in such a sequence where we actually talked about traditional approach. The entire traditional approach we discussed. And yes, I'll give you a revision for the institutional approach also. You might be thinking that Sir is giving the 3 traditional approach revision every day. But what about the institutional approach? Because the slide is somewhat front. So when the slide comes, I'll give you the revision for that also. Don't worry about that. But yes, you should remember that first we talked about traditional approach, and there were limitations to the traditional approach, due to which in 1980s and 90s the new institutionalism came up. And this new institutionalism talks about 3 models. And all the three models we talked about, whether it was rational choice method, okay, so all the three models with regard to what? With regard to new institutionalism we talked about. And then here we are trying to find a difference. Yeah, we are trying to analyze what's the difference between old and new historical institutionalism. Okay, so the pointers go like this. In the old historical institutionalism, more emphasis is on long-term, historical analysis. Second is that it is based on the concept of path dependency. Path dependency refers to what? That the past events and choices, they shape the trajectory of political institutions, and this makes them resistant to change. Then they also talk about the continuity and the rigidity or stability of these institutions. Then they say that the old historical institutionalism had a limited attention to individual agencies. They had limited attention to individual agencies. Rather, they gave more importance to broader structural and historical forces. Broader structural and historical forces that shape institutional outcome. And the last pointer was that old historical institutionalism lays less emphasis on policy analysis. Rather, it only talks about the understanding of the origin, the evolution, and the endurance of institution, rather than analyzing this. Then comes new historical institutionalism. Now, what is this new historical institutionalism? This new historical institutionalism, it's expanded its focus on agencies. That means here it was limited to it had less emphasis on individual agency. Rather, it had more broader emphasis on structural and historical forces. So new historical institutionalism, what it did was that it acknowledged the role of individual agency and strategic behavior in shaping institutional change and outcome. That means, as the old historical institutionalism, it did not emphasize on individual agency. So new historical institutionalism, it gave emphasis to individual agency and their strategic behavior, which would help in shaping institutional change and outcome. This was first. Second, comparative analysis. That means here they are emphasizing on comparative analysis. There they were what they were doing? They were trying to talk about long-term historical analysis. Here they are trying to talk about comparative analysis, that too across different countries, regions, cases, so as to understand variations in institutional development and outcome. Matlab, in old historical institutionalism, it was the long-term historical analysis or long-term historical events and choices which were studied, and that shaped the trajectory of political institutions. But here what we are trying to see is that the new historical institutionalism, it emphasized on comparative analysis, that too across different countries, regions, areas and all, so that they could understand variations in institutional development and outcomes. Then multiple level of what? Analysis. Here we are talking about multiple level of analysis, multiple level of analysis means here the analysis is also with regard to the role of non-state actor, with regard to the role of social movements, international influences. These are also what to say analyzed. So there is a multiple level analysis. There the analysis is only on the historical events. But here there is a multiple level analysis, and in this multiple level analysis, apart from institutions, apart from the what to say political actors and what, here we also study about non-state actors, social movements, international influences, which all help in shaping institutional change. Then here we talk about policy feedback effect. Policy feedback effect means this new historical institutionalism, it examines how the institutions influence political and policy processes. That means how are these institutions, they are influencing political and policy processes, and how policy outcome can in turn shape institutions. That means they are showing a relationship between institution and policy and institution. That means on one hand, they are saying that how institutions, they influence policy, they influence policy and they influence political and policy processes. That means the institutions, how they are influencing political processes and policy processes, and at the same time, they also examine how policy outcome can in turn shape institutions. So they are basically talking about a broader understanding of institutions. So this is a new point, please remember. See, this is a new point. Broader understanding of institutions. Okay? Broader understanding of institutions means the institutions, they say that the institutions, they extend beyond formal rules and structure. And so they say that the institution, they have informal norms, practices and beliefs. So that also needs to be analyzed. So this is what is, you can say, with regard to what new historical institutionalism. Let's revise once more. New historical institutionalism, it talks about what? Expanded focus on agency. Expanded focus on agency means that here it's talking about, here it also tries to analyze the role of individual agency and strategic behavior in shaping institutional behavior and outcomes. Second, comparative analysis. That means this new historical institutionalism, it emphasizes on comparative analysis across different countries, areas, regions, okay, so that the variations in institutional development and outcomes can be studied. So it's basically talking about comparative analysis with comparative analysis between different countries, regions, areas and all, with regard to what? With regard to variations in institutional development and outcome. Then it talks about multiple level of analysis. That means it's saying that there is a multiple level of analysis. That means apart from analyzing the formal and other things, it's also necessary to analyze non-state actors, social movements, international influences, which help in shaping institutional change. Then policy feedback effect. Policy feedback means it says that both institution and policy, they both are correlated, they both have a relation with each other. And what is the relation? It examines that how institution influences political processes and policy processes. That means the institutions do influence political process and policy process. And at the same time, whatever is the policy outcome, it will also shape the institution. That means just like institution influences policy processes and political processes, in the same way, whatever will be the policy outcome, that will also shape the institution. And the last one is broader understanding of institutions. That means it's not only necessary to study formal institutions, rather there are non-formal institutions. That means our study, our analysis about institution should go beyond formal institutions, and it should encompass informal laws, practices, as well as beliefs. Okay, so this is what is the difference between old historical institutionalism and new historical institutionalism. So it's clear to everyone. I need a response from all of you, and the response can be only through the live chat. So is whatever today we discussed with regard to old historical institutionalism and new historical institutionalism, is it all clear to you? Chalo, very good. Now let's go with the conclusion. What do we conclude from this comparison? What is the conclusion from this comparison? The conclusion is that institutions, they encompass, that means they have various elements. Now what are the various elements which institutions have? One is rules, the other one is norms, conventions, traditions, and practices. That means institutions, they have various elements in them, and these various elements which the institutions have in them, or they encompass, are the rules, the norms, the conventions, the traditions, and the practice. And these element and practice, and these element, what they do is that they give a structure to the human organization and shape individual behavior in political process. That means the various elements of institution, whether it is the rule, whether it is the norm, whether it is the convention, whether it is the tradition, or whether it is the practices. These are the various elements of institution: rule, norm, convention, tradition, and practice. Now these various elements of institution, what they do is that they give a structure to human organization. That means they give a structure to the human organization, and as a result, they shape individual behavior in political processes. Okay. Then second conclusion is what? Institutionalism is an approach that focuses on understanding politics from an institutional perspective. That means here the entire politics, the entire political system is studied from what? It's studied from institution point of view. Everywhere we are trying to talk about the importance, the scope, and the elements of institution. So in this approach, what we are seeing is that the focus of understanding politics is from an institutional perspective. Then third point is that the traditional institutionalism, which emphasizes legal, formal, normative, and descriptive aspects, lost prominence with the rise of behavioral movement in 1950s and 60s. That means the traditional approach, it believed on what? It believed on, it gave importance to what? Legal, formal, normative and descriptive aspects. That means it talked about the legal aspects, the formal aspects, the formal, the normative and the descriptive aspects of institutions. So we can say that this traditional approach, it lost its grounds, it's lost its prominence with the rise of what? With the rise of behavioral movement in 1950s and 60s. Then came the new institutionalism, as we said. We all know that this new institutionalism was a more comprehensive understanding of political institutions. More comprehensive. Why? Because it included formal as well as non-formal actors also. It talked about historical and cultural context also. And it talked about various methods like case studies, comparative analysis, quantitative techniques and all. And not the least, it talked about the values and the ideals. And values and ideals of what? Freedom, equality, such type of things. Okay. So here we can say that the new institutionalism, it emerged in 1980s as a response to the dominance of behavioral approach, seeking to bring the focus back to the state and institution. That means after the traditional approach lost prominence and the behavioral approach behavioral movement started to come up, then came the new institutionalism, and this new institutionalism emerged in 1980s, and this was in response to what? In response to the dominance of behavioral approaches, and it tried to bring back the focus on state and institutions. Then the new institutionalism, it again recognizes the importance of institutions in shaping individual political behavior and outcome, as well as the broader structure of socio-economic system. That means here new institutionalism again is giving importance to the very institutions. They say that the institutions are very important. They talk about the importance of institution, and that too in shaping what? The institutions are very important in shaping individual political behavior. Okay, as well as socio-economic systems. So they help in shaping individual behavior, political behavior, socio-economic systems, as well as political outcomes or political processes. Plus, this new institutionalism is more logical, more explanatory, and more empirical, with a focus on context and relativity. So it's more logical, explanatory, and empirical. And comparative politics should maintain a central position in political theory and understanding, utilizing the natural laboratory of the world to test and develop theories. That means here, at last, they are saying that comparative politics must play a central role. Play a central role with what? Play a central role with understanding political theories. And here, how can they understand the political theory? They can understand the political theory by utilizing the natural laboratory of the world. That means they can utilize the world as the natural laboratory, and they can test various political developments and various theories. Okay? Okay. So this was what we concluded with regard to what? Old historical institutionalism, new historical institution. And I said you that when we were talking about traditional approach, yes, we talked about the philosophical approach, we talked about the historical approach, we talked about the legal approach, but what about the institutional approach? This is the institutional approach. And here, the institutional approach, it focuses on what? It focuses on formal structures. it focuses on formal rules and organizations. Its main focus is on formal structure, rules and organization that are within the political system. Plus, it also includes institutions. That means this institutional approach is all what? It's only talking about institutions. And what are these political institutions? These are the government bodies, the legal system, the political parties, and the bureaucracies and other formal entities. So when in the entire traditional approach, we are talking about institutionalism, then came the new institutionalism. In this institutionalism and new institutionalism, in the conclusion, we saw that the focus was entirely on institutions. And what are these institutions which they are talking about? These institutions are basically the government bodies, the legal system, the political parties, as well as the bureaucracies and other formal entities. And in this institutional approach, the importance was in institutions. That is, the institutions are only important when it comes to shaping of political behavior as well as outcome. It also examines the functions, interactions, and dynamics of these institutions. That means all these institutions, whether it is the government, whether it is the political party, legal system, bureaucracies, all these institutions, what this method does is that what this approach does is that it tries to study the functions, the interactions, the dynamics of these institutions. And last one we can say is that the institutional approach seeks to understand how institutions affect governance, decision-making process, and policy institute. That means it is the institutions which will affect governance. It is the institutions which will affect decision-making processes. So how are the institutions actually affecting the governance, the decision-making processes, and the policy outcomes? So this is what is there in institutional approach. Okay. So when we were studying, please give me 1 minute to bring the slide back here. So when we were studying this traditional approach, there was a slight bit of what to say. You can say that there was a mistake from our side, and that was that the sequence of this, what to say, slide, that institutional approach, it went down. Actually, it was traditional approach, then philosophical. This was the first one, philosophical with regard to traditional. Then the second one was historical approach, and the third one was legal approach. So these are the three approaches here. And before we talk about new institutionalism and the comparison between new and old historical institutionalism, before we go with that, just a minute. Let me delete this page. Okay. Now, before we go into that, here, this was before all this, it should be this one. That is institutional approach. This is the fourth traditional, what to say, approach. That is institutional approach. Okay. Okay. Now, we have to go with systems approach. Then we have to talk about political culture. Okay. And in political culture, we'll be talking about Almond and all. So let's talk about today. Let's talk about political culture. Now, this is the new topic. We did a new topic today, new and old historical institutionalism. We tried to compare it, and also we talked about institutional approach. Now today, one more new topic we are going to handle, and that is political culture approach. See, I'll give you the sequence. Okay, don't worry about the sequence. As we come to an end with all the approaches, I'll give you a sequence. You write it down. Okay, you will write it down like the sequence goes like traditional, then new institutionalism, then modern approaches like systems approach and all, like that will go. But here we are going to study about political culture approach. It's a very interesting approach. Let's see what they are saying. The political culture approach focuses on the study of continuous interactions between society and political system. So this political cultural approach, it's talking about the continuous interaction which is taking place between the society as well as the political system. So here the main point is it's talking about the interaction between what? Interaction between society and political institution. So please remember, it's the interaction between society and the political institution. Got it? First thing. Second, what does it say? Second, it says that it emerged as a part of behavioral. It emerged as a part of behavioral science movement, prioritizing casual explanation over interpretive description. That means this political culture approach, it's a part of behavioral science movement. That means there was a behavioral science movement, and in that behavioral science movement, casual explanations were given importance, and this political culture approach, it's nothing else but it's an outcome of the behavioral science movement. And this political culture approach, it prioritize means it gave importance to casual explanations, casual, normal explanations, rather than interpretative descriptions. Interpretative descriptions means where there is an in-depth explanation of everything. So here they are talking about casual explanations. Then comes behavioralist political science, emphasized the study of human behavior and interaction with political institutions and society. So how can you say that this political culture approach is an outcome of behavioral science movement? Now, in this behavioral science movement, what happened was that in this movement, they tried to study the human behavior. Yeah, they tried to study human behavior and the interaction of human with political institutions and society. So, in this behavioral science movement, basically, human behavior is studied about, and the interaction of political institutions and society is talked about. So that's why from this behavioral science movement came up the political culture approach. And this political culture approach, its main focus was the study of interaction between the society and the political system. That means, what is the interaction, continuous interaction between the society and political system? ठीक है जी? Is it clear? See, once again I'll tell. Political culture approach. Now this political culture approach, let's forget what does it focus on. The first thing you must remember that it's an outcome of behavioral science movement. Okay. And what was this behavioral science movement? In this behavioral science movement, the behavioralists, that means those who were the proponents of this movement, they were regarded as behavioralists. The behavioralists, they emphasized the study of human behavior. That means they focused on the study of human behavior as well as the interactions with political institutions and society. That means what was the human behavior? How was the human behavior interaction with the political institution and society? This was what was the focus of the behavioralist. So from this behavioralist, science movement came up the political culture movement, the political culture approach, as a result of which the political culture approach also, it focuses on one thing, that is the continuous interaction between political system and what? Society. And whatever study they are doing, that study is not based on interpretative description. It's not based on descriptive things or descriptive analysis. Rather, it's based on casual explanation. Okay, so this political culture approach, it's only based on casual explanations. There is no descriptive interpretations taking place. Okay, it must be clear to you. So these behavioralists, those who were there in political science, these behavioralists are basically, behavioralist comes from the word behavior. So they are trying to understand, they are trying to study human behavior and the interactions which take place between political institutions and society. And I'm telling you, political institutions ka matlab kya hai? It's the government, it's the legal system, the bureaucracies. They all comprise of the political institution. And even there are non-formal actors also which are a part of this political institution. And even the political parties are a part of this political institution. Okay? So this is what. Next, the political culture gained significance in political science as it provided legitimacy and authority to the discipline after World War II. That means before World War II, we all know that before World War II, we all know that it was the traditional approach which was widely studied. Everywhere there was traditional approach. But after the second World War, that means there came the new institutionalism, and this new institutionalism was because of the behavioralist movement which was taking place. And here we see that this political culture approach, how did it gain significance? It gained significance in political science because it provided a legitimacy and authority. Legitimacy means legal. It provided a legal aspect. It provided an authority to this discipline after Second World War. This discipline, in the sense, it provided an authority to the contemporary politics after the Second World War. The sociological and behavioral aspects became prominent in the scholarly investigation of political science. Earlier, what was happening in traditional? There was investigation with regard to formal institutions. There was investigation with regard to historical aspects. But now, after the coming of this political culture approach, after the behavioralist science movement, now the scholars, they are investigating political science from behavioral aspects as well as from sociological aspects. See, I said you, in new institutionalism, do you remember what did we say? in new institutionalism, they try to integrate various principles from various disciplines. Try to integrate various principles from various disciplines like economy, sociology, and political science. As a result of which, the new institutionalism, it developed a more comprehensive understanding of political institutions. So that's what it's telling here, that with the coming of this political culture approach, now the scholars, they are trying to investigate political institutions from behavioral aspects. Behavioral aspects means from human behavior aspects, as well as from sociological aspects, sociological with respect to society. So now the scholars, they have broadened their investigation. Okay, they have broadened their investigation, and behavioral as well as sociological aspects are brought in for investigating political science and political institutions. Then there is a scholar named Almond. His full name was Gabriel Almond. His work was Comparative Political System, 1956. And in this Comparative Political System, 1956, he popularized the very concept of political culture in modern political science. So in modern political science, the very concept of political culture or the political culture approach, it was popularized by none other than Gabriel Almond. And one of his work was with regard to Comparative Political System, 1956. I need everyone to write this. I need everyone to write this. Please, I'm telling you, only listening to the lecture, only listening to me won't do wonders for you. Won't do wonders for you. You are mature enough. You people are mature enough that whatever I am telling, from that you should interpret like which is the important word or which is the important sentence which you should note down. Like when I said political culture approach, you should always note down focuses on the interaction between political system and society, plus outcome of behavioralist science movement. Plus, it's the scholars, they are focusing on behavioralism, behavioral aspects as well as sociological aspects. And then in 1956, Gabriel Almond, he had written something, he had written a book, and that was Comparative Political Systems. And this work of his, that is Comparative Political Systems, it popularized the very concept of political culture in modern political science. And then last, according to Almond, every political system is embedded in a particular pattern of orientations to political action, which is defined as political culture. So what is Almond's definition of political culture? Almond's definition of political culture is that there is political system everywhere. There is political system everywhere. हर जगह political system है. And everywhere where there is political system, it is embedded in a particular pattern. Embedded in a particular pattern of orientation. That means, अगर India में जो political system है, it has its own pattern of orientation. America, which has a political system, it has its own pattern of orientation. So Almond says that every political system is embedded in a particular pattern of orientation to political action, and this is what he defines political culture. That means political cultures of different countries will be different. Political cultures of different areas will be different. Political culture of different regions will be different. This is what is Almond trying to specify. And according to Almond, political culture is nothing else but it is the particular path, it is the particular pattern of orientation to political action. This particular pattern of orientation to political action, this is what is political culture. And this is always embedded, yeah, it is there in every political system. ठीक है जी? चलो. अब let's talk about the Almond and Verba's conception of political culture. देखो, Almond ने वो अपना वर्क लिखा था ना. What was that? Comparative Political System. कब? 1956. And by this, his work, the concept of political culture became popularized in modern political science. ठीक है? And Almond gave his own notion of political culture. He says that the particular pattern of orientation to political action. Everyone has their own pattern of orientation to political action. Now, that pattern of orientation to political action, which is there in the political system, that is called as political culture, according to Almond, Gabriel Almond. Now, Almond and Verba's concept of, yeah, you can say conception of political culture was there in their influential book. And what was the name of that influential book? That was the Civic Culture. The influential book name was The Civic Culture, Political Attitudes and Democracies in 5 Nations, 1963. That means Almond and Verba's conception of political culture was outlined in their influential work, their influential book, which was titled as The Civic Culture, that is the political attitude and democracy in 5 Nations, 1963. Now, what they are trying to tell in this book about political culture, what they are trying to say, they sought to understand the relationship between political culture and democratic stability. That means they are trying to establish a relationship between political culture and democratic stability. And Almond and Verba, what they did was that they identified 3 types of political culture. One was participant, the other one was subject, and the third one was parochial. So, according to Almond and Verba, there are 3 types of political cultures. One is participant, that means one pattern of orientation is participant. The other one is what? Subject. And the third one is parochial. Okay. The third one is what? Parochial. Please, you can write the name of the book. I will request everyone to write the name of the book. It's a request to everyone. Please write the name of the book. Okay, please write the name of the book. Written. So what was the name of the book, influential book? It's the Civic Culture. It's the Civic Culture, Political Attitude and Democracy in 5 Nations, 1963. And second point was that they were trying to understand the relationship between political culture and democratic stability. And Almond and Verba, what they did was that they identified 3 types of political culture. One is participant, that means those who participate and all. Other one is subject, and the third one is parochial. Parochial is basically nothing else, but it is with regard to matlab, it is with regard to when someone is only concerned with what to say, small issues. They are only concerned with the issues of their area, of the small issues with regard to their area. That is what is parochial. Okay. And second, next they say that participant political culture, they talk about participant politics, is characterized by active citizen involvement, high level political knowledge, and strong belief in democratic values. That means, go with the definition of political culture of Almond. What was his definition of political culture? Political culture is the pattern of orientation to political action, which is there in political system, every political system. And that pattern of orientation to political action, that means, what is your pattern of orientation? What are you thinking about political action? Do you want to become a participant? Do you want to become a subject? Do you want to act as a parochial? So this is what is Almond's and Verba's thought with regard to political culture. So that's why they identified three types of political culture. One was participant. Now this participant political culture, they characterized it by, number one, active citizen involvement. That means this person, this individual is a very active citizen. An active citizen involvement, why? Because they are very actively involved in the political process, in the political system, and they have a high knowledge of politics, or high political knowledge, plus they have a strong belief in democratic values. This is participant. Subject political culture is characterized by what? Limited citizen participant, a reliance on authority figures. Reliance means they depend on authority figures. That means strong figures, they depend upon them. That means they rely on the strong figures, the big leaders, the strong leaders. That means the persons who rely on strong leaders, they are dependent on those strong leaders. That's why the word subject is given. And they are not active citizen participants, they are limited citizen participants. Plus they have low sense of political efficacy. Efficacy means they have low sense of political knowledge. This is the subject political culture. And what about the parochial political culture? I said to you, parochial is something which is with regard to a small area. That means you are only concerned with your area and nothing else. Parochial. They have an attitude that भाड़ में जाए दुनिया, हमारे साथ जो हो रहा है वही ठीक है. What is happening here, that is important to me. I don't care what is happening elsewhere. So this parochial political culture, they reflect apathy and disengagement from politics, with citizens having little interest or awareness of political affairs. Okay? So very, very easy thing is there. First, you have to write about the influential book. Then they try to understand the relationship between what? They are trying to understand the relationship between political culture and democratic stability. And Almond and Verba, as a result, they identified three types of political culture. One is participant political culture. Now, this participant political culture is characterized by what? Is characterized by active citizen participant, high degree of political knowledge, and have great faith in democratic values. This is what is participant political culture. Okay. Then the second political culture is subject political culture. Subject political culture has limited political knowledge, limited active participant, limited citizen participant. That means they are not that participant. They do not participate much in the political system. They are limited citizen participant. Plus, they have low degree of political knowledge. They have low degree of political knowledge. And the third thing is that they are reliant, they are dependent on authority figures. Okay? They are dependent on authority figures. I can give you a very good example for this. That, for example, you can say that the Congress party depends upon this subject political culture. To be honest, the Congress party or the BJP, they all are with regard to subject political culture. Why? Because whosoever are the political actors in BJP, to win their elections nowadays, they only know one thing, that is Modi, Modi, Modi. That means they are dependent on what? They are dependent on authority figure like Modi. Okay? And when it comes to political knowledge, they have very little political knowledge. Okay? But yes, to make you understand, ho sakta hai it can be illogical, but only to make you understand with what is this telling, I gave you an example. Okay? Just to make you understand. Ho sakta hai this is not true. But yes, according to my perspective, I feel that the authority figure is Prime Minister Modi. And by using the name of Prime Minister Modi, by using his face, the other leaders in BJP, they try to win elections. So that means they are reliant on authority figures. That is what is subject political culture. That means they are limited active participants, citizen participants. Dusra, they have low knowledge, low level of political knowledge and reliant on authority figure. Then comes parochial political culture. Almond and Verba says that the parochial political culture, this category of people, they are disengaged. They keep themselves disengaged from politics. That means they say that हमें politics से कोई लेना देना नहीं है, हमें तो अपने से लेना देना है भाई, अपने काम से, अपना घर से लेना देना है. What will politics do to us? This is their thought. So they are disengaged from politics. Plus, these are the citizens which have little interest and awareness of political affairs. This is only what is parochial political culture. So तीनों के बारे में he has talked about. ठीक है? All the three मतलब types of political culture. Then Almond and Verba argues that a strong participant political culture is conducive to democratic stability and effective governance. Now they say that in modern political system, they talk about democracy, but this democratic political system, its stability and its governance completely depends upon a strong participant political culture. That means they are advocating, Almond and Verba, they are advocating, they are emphasizing on a strong participant political culture. Why? Because they say that if there is a strong participant political culture, then there will be democratic stability as well as there will be effective governance. See, modern political system only talks about democracy. No one in modern times, no one in contemporary times, they talk about autocracy, they talk about monarchy, they talk about dictatorship and all. Everyone, each and every individual is supportive of democracy. So that's why Almond and Verba, who are with regard to modern political science, modern study of political science, they say that there must be a strong participant political culture And with this strong participant political culture, there will be democratic stability. That means democracy will be there. Plus, there will be effective governance. Because when there is democracy, then only the governance will be effective and good. Okay, take the example of Pakistan, our neighbor. Is the democracy stable there? No. Is the democracy stable there? No, not at all. So when the democracy is not stable, is there a good governance, an effective governance? No. That's why now Pakistan is all into what? Is all into that udhar system. It's all caught in the web of that debt trap. Whether it is the debt trap of China or whether it is the debt trap of Western nations, it's all caught. And who is facing the effects? It is the common people who are facing the bad effects of that. But what about India? India's democracy is stable. You can see that after 2014, from 1990 to 2014, the political situation, the political system in India, it was somewhat changed. It came the coalition era. We all know there was a coalition era. Let's come somewhat in a discussion mode so that we can understand. It was a coalition era. Okay. After P.V. Narasimha Rao's government, there was a coalition era. Whether there was a coalition government formed by the NDA or it was formed by the UPA. NDA under the leadership of Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, UPA under the leadership of Shri Manmohan Singh ji. But do you think there was democratic stability? No, not at all. Why? Because the coalition partners, they used to apply pressure tactics. So, because there was coalition politics and because what was happening was that the pressure was applied by the regional parties and all. So as a result, there was no good governance, no effective governance. Yes, governance was taking place, but that governance was not effective, was not good. The government was not able to take good decisions. Why? Because of the fear that the parties who are supporting them can give up their support. But what happened after 2014? The political system or the political culture in India, it changed. Now we are talking about majority party. Yes, coalition partners are there, but it is the BJP who has the majority seats. So whenever it comes with taking decisions with regard to issues like Article 370, Triple Talaq and all, the government is not afraid. It goes on with the decision. It knows that it has majority in the Lok Sabha, in the Rajya Sabha and also in the states. So it's not afraid of taking decisions. So what happens? See, the nature of governance change. Why? Because there is a democratic stability. Because the party BJP has more than 272 seats. So if their allies leave them also, then also the government will be in power. So there is democratic stability till 5 years. And when there is democratic stability, so what happened? The governance gets good. And we can see, yes, the governance is getting good. But yes, everything cannot run good. There are problems like unemployment in India, which is a burning problem. Price rise is a very burning problem in India. But still, we can see that we are way ahead with our neighboring countries. Whether it is Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, or Pakistan, or even many of the European countries, we are way ahead after the pandemic. We are not in any sort of debt. Our country is not in fiscal deficit. A lot, yes, there is a fiscal deficit, but not that much, which other countries are. So that's what political culture. So here, Almond and Verba, when they're talking about modern political science, they say that democratic stability and effective governance is only possible when the political culture is strong participant. That means there should be a strong participant political culture. And what they did was they conducted comparative studies in 5 countries. That's why the name of their book, influential book, was what? The Civic Culture, Political Attitudes and Democracies in 5 nations. And what are the 5 countries in which they are doing comparative studies? It is the USA, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, and Mexico. USA, United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, and Mexico. So these are the 5 nations in which they are conducting what? They are conducting comparative studies. And this comparative study they are conducting to analyze the relationship between political culture and democratic system. That means to understand the relationship between political culture and democratic system. That means, what is political culture? Once again, I'll ask you. Political culture is the path of orientation to political action. What is your path of orientation? What is Mexico's path of orientation? What is US path of orientation? So that means Almond and Verba, when they are trying to conduct comparative studies in 5 countries, that is US, UK, Germany, Italy, and Mexico, then they are trying to analyze the relationship between political culture and the democratic system. Then Almond and Verba's work contributed to understanding of the role of citizens' attitude, beliefs, and values in shaping the functioning and success of democratic system. Matlab, whatever Almond and Verba were talking about political culture, whatever comparative studies they were conducting, all this was very helpful. All this was very helpful in what? All this was very helpful in understanding the role of citizens' attitude, citizens' belief, and citizens' value in shaping and functioning of the success of democratic system. That means Almond and Verba, by their comparative studies, they are trying to say that the success and the failure of democratic system, it also depends upon the role of citizens' value, citizens' belief, and citizens' attitude. Now let's talk about the civic culture. Civic culture is, before going into this civic culture, see, this one is clear, Almond and Verba. Anji, Almond and Verba's conception of political culture, is it clear to each and every one of you? Please give a response to what I'm asking. Is it clear? See, we were talking about political culture, and political culture, as I said you, let's give a quick wrap up. Political culture, as I said you, it's an approach which is an outcome of the behavioral science movement. And the behavioralists were of the belief that they were trying to study human behavior as well as the relationship between society and political system. Okay? So they were talking about the, they were trying to study human behavior as well as the interactions of political institutions and society. So as a result of which, the political culture approach came up. And this political culture approach basically focuses on the continuous study of the relationship between society and what? Political system. And here the scholars, they focus on behavioral aspects also and on sociological aspects also. Apart from this, we also talked about Almond's work, that is Comparative Political System, where he's trying to give the definition of political culture. But when we talk about Almond and Verba's conception of political culture. It's all mentioned in their influential book, and that influential book was the Civic Culture. That influential book was the Civic Culture, that is Political Attitude and Democracy in 5 Nations, 1963. Here, Almond and Verba, they are trying to understand the relationship between political culture and democratic stability. And Almond and Verba, for this, they identified 3 types of political culture. Participant political culture, where the characteristic is that there is an active citizen participant, there is an active citizen participation, plus high level of knowledge, political knowledge, high level of political knowledge, and believes in democratic value. Second type was that of subject political culture. Subject political culture, limited citizen participant, plus dependent on authority figure. They were dependent on authority figure, and also less knowledge, less level of political knowledge. And the third one was parochial political culture. In parochial political culture, the person is what the word used was by them was disengaged. That means there is an apathy and disengagement of that person from politics, and the citizens have little interest or awareness of political culture. So from this, Almond and Verba, they conclude is that there should be a strong participant democracy, there should be a strong participant political culture, so that there can be democratic stability as well as effective governance. And after that, they try to study 5 nations. That means they conducted comparative study in 5 nations, that is the US, the UK, Germany, Italy, and Mexico. And what did they try to study and do the analysis? They tried to study these 5 nations, and they tried to analyze the relationship between political culture and democratic systems. And from this, their work, they contributed. What was their contribution? They contributed that the understanding of citizens' value, of citizens' belief, and citizens' attitude is very, very important in shaping the functioning and success of democratic system. Now let's talk about civic culture. What is the civic culture? Now, Ronald and the link between cultural factors and political stability. See, here what we are trying to talk about is there are cultural factors with political stability and economic development. Now, what is Ronald trying to define civic culture as? He defines civic culture as a coherent syndrome of personal life satisfaction, political satisfaction, interpersonal trust, and support for the existing social order. So, according to Ronald Engelhardt, see, his full name is Engelhardt. You can pronounce it in your own way. It's Engelhardt. So instead of telling Ronald Engelhardt, I know it will be difficult for you to pronounce. So just say Ronald. Okay. Just forget this. Just say Ronald. So Ronald is talking about the definition of civic culture. And when he defines civic culture, he is trying to link cultural factors. When he is defining civic culture, he is trying to link cultural factors with political stability and economic development. That means Ronald is trying to link cultural factors with political stability and economic development. And he is trying to define civic culture as a coherent syndrome. It's a coherent syndrome of personal life satisfaction. Coherent syndrome of personal life satisfaction plus political satisfaction plus interpersonal trust and support for existing social order. So civic culture is nothing else but a coherent syndrome where there is a personal life satisfaction, a political satisfaction, a interpersonal trust, as well as support for the existing social order. And they say that societies with high degree of this syndrome, that means there is a coherent syndrome. And what is this coherent syndrome? This coherent syndrome is with respect to personal life satisfaction, political satisfaction, as well as interpersonal trust. There is a trust between everyone, interpersonal, and support for what? Support for existing social order. And Ronald says that those societies which have high degree of this syndrome are more likely to be stable democracies. That means in those societies where there is a high degree of coherent syndrome, that means where there is a high degree of interpersonal trust, where there is a high degree of personal life satisfaction, where there is a high degree of political satisfaction. So in such societies, there is more likely to be stable democracy. Plus, positive attitude towards democratic institutions contribute to stable democracy. And why he says that because there is a coherent syndrome, and this coherent syndrome in which they are politically satisfied, culturally they are satisfied, interpersonal satisfaction is also there, trust is also there, personal life satisfaction is also there, and plus they are also satisfied with the existing social order. So as a result, what happens is that their attitude, that means the citizens' attitude towards democratic institutions, contribute, there is a positive attitude towards democratic institutions, and as a result, the democratic institution or democracy is stable. Okay, so when we talk about civic culture, we will be talking about Ronald, and in civic culture, Ronald is trying to link cultural factors and political factors, and he is trying to link cultural factors with political stability and economic development. That means he says that when we are talking about political stability, when we are talking about economic development, it is related to the cultural factors. So here he talks about civic culture. He talks about civic culture as a coherent syndrome. It is a coherent syndrome of personal life satisfaction, of political satisfaction, of interpersonal trust, plus support for the existing social order. And further he says that if such type of syndrome is very high in a society, then in that particular society, democracy will be stable. There is more likely for democracy to be stable. Where? In societies where there is high coherent syndrome. And he also says that it develops a positive attitude towards democratic institutions. And when it develops a positive attitude towards democratic institutions, then it will positively contribute towards stable democracy. Okay? Please, you can write it down if you want to write. I can only request you to write it down. Okay. So here we are talking about what? Coherent syndrome. Okay. Coherent syndrome is with regard to your attitude. When you are in a stressful situation, what is your attitude? Your coherent syndrome must be of personal life satisfaction. The coherent syndrome is with regard to political satisfaction, with regard to interpersonal trust, and with regard to support for the existing social. That means if this coherent syndrome is very high, that means you are very much satisfied. Okay, you are very much satisfied. Chalo. Okay, so almond and verba bhi ho gaya. Then we talked about civic culture, Ronald's. Then here is the historical perspective on political culture. What was this historical perspective of political culture? Now, this historical perspective of political culture was given by historians like John L. Brooke and Daniel Walker. Daniel Walker Ho. Daniel, please write it down. Daniel Walker Ho and John L. Brooke. They are the historians who talked about the historical perspective of political culture, or political culture in their historical inquiries. That means they are trying to do historical inquiries with regard to political culture. Okay, they are trying to do historical inquiries with regard to political culture. And who are the historians? John L. Brooke and Daniel Walker. Chalo, what are they actually trying to do? Let's see. Howe extended the conceptual arena of political culture by including social movements and the struggles for political power. That means here, these historians are basically, you can say, broadening the very, definition of political culture. They are broadening the very definition of political culture, or they are broadening the very conceptual arena of political culture. And they say that in this very concept of political culture, it should also include social movements and struggles for political power. That means there were social movements in the history, there were struggles in the history for political power. They should be also included in the concept of political culture. So political culture was broadened to include all the struggles over power, not just those decided by elections. Okay, simple. Koi doubt nahi? So what was this historical perspective of political culture? This historical perspective of political culture was given by Daniel Walker Ho and John Brooke and John L. Brooke. Name of the persons, historians, John L. Brooke, Daniel Walker Ho. And what they are trying to do? They are trying to broaden the concept of political culture. And they say that political culture is not only political, it's not only political struggle for political struggle included, which is included in the elections and all. They say that it should also include social struggles and the struggles for political power. Okay, so they are talking about struggles over power, not those decided by elections. Then comes social capital and political culture. There is a person named Robert Putnam. The person named Robert Putnam. What he did was that he tried to study the working of Italian regional government, and he introduced the concept of social capital to analyze people's engagement in politics. See, first we are talking about historical perspective of political culture. Here, Brooke and Walker Ho, they are trying to broaden the very concept or conceptual arena of political culture. They say that it's not only struggle in elections, but it's also social movements and their struggle for political power. So they have broadened the very concept of political culture. Second comes Robert Putnam and political culture. Robert Putnam, what he did, he studied the working of Italian regional government, and when he studied the working of Italian regional government, he introduced the concept of social capital, and with this concept of social capital, he's trying to analyze people's engagement in politics. And this social capital, according to Putnam, his name was Putnam, if I'm right. So according to Putnam, this social capital refers to networks, shared norms, values, and understandings that facilitate cooperation within or among groups. That means when he was trying to study the working of Italian general government, he came up with this concept of social capital, and he said that social capital is nothing else but it is among the people, among the groups, and among this group, among these people, there is what? Network, there is social norms, there is shared norms, there are shared values, understandings that facilitate cooperation. That means he's trying to talk about social capital, in which he's trying to point out the cooperation that takes place between various groups or takes place among the groups, and that is due to the network, the shared norm, value, and understanding. Putnam's hypothesized that societies with high social capital encourage political participation, contribute to political stability, and effective governance. See, Almond and Verba, they say that democratic stability and good governance or effective governance depends upon strong citizen participate. Okay, it depends upon strong participant political culture. Whereas Putnam, in his social capital, he says that societies which have high social capital, these societies, they encourage what? They encourage people's participation, they encourage political stability. As a result, they will encourage effective governance. So this is what is Putnam's social capital. So here we talked about historical perspective, which was given by John L. Brooke and Daniel Walker Ho. Here they are trying to talk about what? Include social movements and their struggles for political power. Matlab, they are trying to broaden the concept of political culture by including what? By including social movements and their struggle for political power. Then comes social capital. It was given by Robert Putnam, and Robert Putnam, what he did, he studied the working of Italian regional government, where he said that, where he introduced this concept of social capital, and he tried to analyze people's engagement in politics. And according to his social capital, he says that, what is this social capital referring to? It's referring to the network, it's referring to the shared values, it's referring to the understanding, it's referring to the shared norms that facilitate cooperation within or among groups. And Putnam is of the belief that societies which have high social capital, those societies which have high social capital, they will encourage people's participation, they will encourage stability, political stability, and they will encourage good governance. Okay. Then comes political culture and ideology. Here we are talking about neo-Marxist scholars like Louis Althusser. It's Althusser. Louis Althusser. He is emphasizing on the role of ideology in analyzing the role of culture in politics. That means here, the neo-Marxist, they are trying to study political culture by studying the role of ideology. That means the neo-Marxist scholars, they are emphasizing the role of ideology in analyzing the role of culture in politics. And this neo-Marxist scholar, Louis Althusser, he distinguished between repressive state apparatus, that is coercive, and ideological state apparatus, that is operating through ideology. That means in his in his form of political culture, Althusser, what he says is that he's trying to distinguish between two apparatus. One is repressive apparatus, which is coercive. That means they are trying to pressurize and oppress things. And the other one is ideological state apparatus. Ideological state apparatus is nothing else but a state which is operating through ideology. And further, what he says that political culture becomes prevailing value system and knowledge, structure disseminated by dominant classes to maintain their political dominance. That means here he's talking about the dominant class. What is that dominant class doing? The dominant class is nothing else but it's trying to dominate the political culture. And when it is trying to dominate the political culture, then he says that the ideology will disseminate the dominant class and it will maintain what? And it will maintain peace. That means the dominant class always tries to be the dominant force. So to maintain the dominance, the dominant class, what it does is that it disseminates. Disseminates means it destroys the prevailing value system and knowledge. Okay, so this is what is the neo-Marxist scholars talking about. See, don't get confused. First we talked about historical perspective. That means political culture has various studies. One was historical perspective. Historical perspective was done by Brooke and Ho. Okay, David Ho and Brooke. Then came the social capital, that was done by Robert Putnam. And in social capital, Robert Putnam talks about social capital. That means Putnam is actually talking about people's engagement. Okay, and he's talking about the network, the shared norms, the values, the understandings that facilitate cooperation within or among groups. And he also says that if a society has a high social capital, it means it will encourage political participation, it will encourage political stability, and it will encourage effective governance. Then we talk about the neo-Marxist scholar. Neo-Marxist scholar, what is his name? Louis Althusser. And Louis Althusser is giving significance, he's emphasizing on the role of ideology. He's emphasizing on the role of ideology in analyzing political culture. So he's analyzing political culture with the role of ideology. And as a result, he talks about two apparatus, two state apparatus. One is repressive state apparatus, which is coercive, and the other one is ideological state apparatus, which is working according to the ideology, operating according to the ideology. And he says that the ideological state apparatus is the best one. Why? Because in the repressive state apparatus, it is the dominant class which tries to disseminate, which tries to destroy the knowledge structure, and it tries to destroy the prevailing value system so that they can maintain their political dominance. And their fourth one we talk about is subcultures within political culture. Subcultures means there were many multiple subcultures within political system. ठीक है, मतलब the existence of multiple subcultures within political system challenges the assumption of single national political culture. That means here those scholars who believe in this, they say that the very existence of single nation political culture, a single national political culture, is challenged by the existence of multiple subcultures within a thing. And subcultures refers to what? It refers to distinctive identities and behavior of diverse social groups and communities. Subculture here refers to there are diverse social group, there are diverse community who have diverse what? Identities. So here subculture means in a national political culture, there are multiple subcultures. That means there are multiple social groups, there are multiple communities which have distinctive identities. And different subcultures develop based on various factors such as elite versus mass culture, cultural divisions within the elites, generational subcultures, and social structure. That means they are giving proof that why multiple subcultures exist. Yeah, what is the reason the multiple subcultures exist? What is the reason the diverse communities, diverse social groups exist within a single national political culture? So within a single national political culture, various subcultures, why do they exist? Because there are factors like elite versus the mass culture. There are factors like cultural divisions within the elite. Within the elite only, there are cultural divisions. Plus, there are generational subcultures also. Like, for example, in India, caste system. There are generational subcultures also, and the social structure. And when there is an interaction of different subcultures, it has an impact on the political system as a whole. So here, when we are talking about subcultures with reference to political culture, when we are talking about subcultures with reference to political culture, they are saying that the very existence of multiple subculture, challenges the view of a single national political culture. It challenges the view of a single, it challenges the existence of a single national political culture. And what is this multiple subculture? This multiple subculture is with regard to different identities of different communities and different social groups. And what are the factors for these subcultures to come up? The factors are like elite versus the mass culture, plus cultural difference within the elites, cultural divisions within the elites, plus the social structure, generational subcultures. So these are the reasons why multiple subcultures exist in a political culture. And the final thing is that when there is an interaction of all these multiple subcultures, it will leave an impact on the political system as a whole. Okay, so these are the, you can say, various types. First, we talked about political culture. Then we talked about the Almond and Verba's conception of political culture, where they talk about relationship between political culture and democratic stability. But after that, civic culture was talking about a coherent syndrome with reference to personal life satisfaction and all. Then we talked about historical perspective, where political culture, they said that it should also include social movements and their struggle for political power. That means the very conceptual arena of political culture, it should be broadened. Then we talked about, and it was given by John Brooke and Daniel Walker Ho. Then we talked about social capital and political culture. This social capital and political culture was given by Robert Putnam. And Robert Putnam, he tried to talk about individuals' engagement, people's engagement in politics. And his social capital is nothing else but it refers to the network. It refers to the shared value, shared norms and understandings, shared value, shared norms and understandings that facilitate cooperation within groups or among groups. And Putnam is also of the view that societies which have high social culture, high social capital, societies which have high social capital, they encourage political participation, they encourage political stability as well as effective governance. Then comes the neo-Marxism scholars. The neo-Marxism scholars, they talk political culture from the point of view of role of ideology, and they give emphasis to the role of ideology. And according to them, there are two state apparatus. One is which is coercive, which is repressive state apparatus. The other one is ideological state apparatus, which operates on the basis of ideology. And they say that the politically dominant section, just to maintain that political dominance, they are destroying the values of the society, they are destroying the knowledge structure. And the last one, we talked about subcultures within political culture. Subcultures means there are multiple subcultures within the political culture. So it challenges the existence of a single national political culture. And subcultures here refers to different identities which are there of different groups and different communities. And why are these identities different? Why are there subcultures? Because of the factors like elite versus mass culture, culture diversity within the elites, social structure. These are the factors because of which there are subcultures. And when these subcultures, they interact with each other, that is what they say that is what will impact the political system as a whole. Okay, so this is what is political culture. So for today, we'll end the class here. Okay, for today, we'll end the class here. And tomorrow, we'll be trying to finish this entire, approaches part, because I said we'll try on Monday to have an MCQ from this approach side. So thank you all for joining this online live class with me, Girish Venkatesh. And thank you all for joining the online live class on Drishti IAS platform, on live Drishti learning app. So we at Drishti IAS, we are really happy to give you guidance with regard to UGC-NET paper 2 political science. And I would only say one thing, that please, it's a very competitive world. You have to come up with your preparation. Just don't waste time and just start with the preparation. And if you are joining live, it's very good. But if you are looking at the recording part of my lecture, then please remember, for the entire 2 hours, you have to sit and listen the lecture at one go. Please do not do such things like 10 minutes sune, fir break liya, fir 15 minutes sune. No, at one go, you should listen the lecture for 2 hours. And whatever we are doing in this class, the same what you should do is that you should take out a book of your choice, or which you have been reading for in your BAs and MAs, and in that book you can you can go with political culture, you can go with the traditional approach, with the new institutionalism, and you can see what's written there. So tomorrow our main focus will be on systems approach. Please remember, our main focus will be on systems approach, structural functionalist, and the criticism with regard to political culture. Thank you all once again. Have a good day and meet you tomorrow at 11 a.m.